Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I'm super excited to be your guide today. You can just think of me as your friendly neighborhood geography teacher. Today, we're actually going to become geographic detectives. We have a completely fascinating mystery to solve about East Asia. Why do people live exactly where they do? How does the very land beneath their feet change how they live, work, and thrive? So grab your detective hats, because we're about to uncover some amazing clues together.
Imagine waking up right in the middle of a massive, brightly lit city like this. This is Shanghai, China. Just look at those towering skyscrapers, the glowing lights, the endless rows of buildings. Can you feel the energy? Millions of people are waking up, going to school, working, and eating all in this one space. It looks completely packed, right? But here's the wild part. Not all of East Asia looks like this. In fact, most of it really doesn't.
And that brings us to today's core mystery. Check out this population density map of East Asia. This basically shows us where all the people are. See those dark purple areas along the edges? Those are incredibly crowded coasts. But then, look at the gigantic yellow spaces in the middle and to the west. Those areas are almost completely empty. So what's the deal? Why are some places packed with millions of people, while other places have almost nobody at all? Let's crack this case.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by looking at where people live. Then we'll dive into land, farming, and steppes. Next, we'll explore crowded corridors and spaces, followed by the diverse beliefs and people of the region. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with a quick summary.
Let's kick things off with our first clue. Where do people live?
To really understand where people settle down, we have to look at the physical environment. It totally dictates where we can live. For human survival, there's a super important vocabulary word you need to know: arable. Arable basically means land that's able to grow crops. Think of arable land like the kitchen or the grocery store of a whole country. If the land isn't arable, you can't grow food. And if you can't grow food, well, you definitely can't feed a huge group of people. It's really that simple. People naturally want to live near the kitchen.
So, get this. The crucial point here is this number: 15%. Only about 15% of China's massive land is arable. Just 15% is good for growing crops. Because most of this grocery store land is over in eastern China, people settled there a long time ago to farm. Today, more than 9/10 of China's people live crowded together in the east. They're staying close to where the food and the markets originally started.
Now let's look back at our map and focus on those yellow, empty areas in western and central China. Why is nobody living there? Well, it's just not arable. These regions are covered in harsh deserts and giant mountain ranges. Because you literally can't farm there are way fewer jobs and almost no economic opportunity. So what do people do? Due to the lack of opportunities, millions of people from these rural country areas end up packing their bags and moving to the big coastal cities in the east just to find work.
Moving right along to clue number 2, land, farming, and steppes.
We know people need farming, but what happens when the land is just endless grass? Let me introduce you to the word steppe. A steppe is a vast area of grassland. I want you to imagine a giant, never-ending grassy backyard that just goes on for hundreds of miles. Much of Mongolia is actually covered by these steppes. Because it's just grass, you can't really build big farms. Instead, about half of all Mongolians are nomadic. This means they live in tents and constantly move around the steppes to follow their herds of livestock, like sheep and horses, so the animals have fresh grass to eat.
But there is a pretty serious problem happening on the steppes right now. It's a real-life chain reaction. Step 1, climate change is heavily altering the weather. Step 2, this leads to terrible droughts, which means a severe lack of rain, combined with unusually harsh, freezing winters. Step 3, because of this extreme weather, millions of livestock have sadly died. And finally, Step 4, without their animals, the herders completely lose their way to survive. So they are literally forced to leave the vast steppes and move to the capital city, Ulaanbaatar, just to find jobs. The environment is actually pushing them into the city.
Which brings us to our third clue: crowded corridors and spaces.
We've seen how the environment pushes people toward the coasts and cities. But how on earth do millions of people share so little space? To understand this, we need the word corridor. A corridor is a narrow, confined strip connecting one or more places. Just imagine the main hallway in your middle school between classes. Everyone needs to use it, it's pretty narrow, it connects all the classrooms, and everyone is moving super fast. That is exactly what a corridor is like, just on a massive scale for an entire country.
And this perfectly illustrates how countries handle these crazy busy corridors. Check out this super fast bullet train in Taiwan. When you have a narrow corridor filled with millions of people,
You absolutely need public transportation that moves them efficiently. Over in Japan, most people live right along the coast. They have something called the Tokaido Corridor, and actually holds more than 3/5 of Japan's entire population. Cities like Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka are all perfectly linked along this one busy, high-speed strip. Because so many folks live in these corridors, space gets severely confined. Confine basically means to limit or restrict. Think about winter time at school. Imagine trying to shove your huge winter coat, your boots, your packed backpack, and all your heavy books into one tiny half-size locker. It is a really tight squeeze. That's exactly what it feels like when you confine millions of people into a small urban space.
So, how does a place like Japan solve this space problem? Well, they get incredibly creative. If you can't build out, you build up, creating giant skyscrapers. Or you build down, creating massive underground shopping centers. During rush hour, the subways get so confined that they actually hire people called subway pushers. Their literal job is to gently push people into the crowded train cars just so the doors can close. No way, right? And if you're traveling and just need a cheap place to sleep, you can rent a tiny bed in a capsule hotel, which is basically just a small tube built right into the wall. Space is very, very precious.
All right, let's look at our fourth clue: diverse beliefs and people.
So we know where people live and how they fit into these tiny spaces, but who are they? East Asia is home to an absolutely amazing variety of cultures. When it comes to religion, there's a ton of diversity. Many East Asians historically follow Buddhism, Taoism, or in Japan, Shinto. Often, people actually combine elements of these different traditions. Through trade and missionaries, Islam and Christianity also spread to East Asia over the centuries. It's also super important to note how governments impact this. For example, partly because communist governments have historically discouraged religion, a lot of East Asians don't follow any religion. In China, the government has made rules that limit the number of churches and strictly control religious organizations, meaning people can't always freely form groups to practice their religion.
Now, when we look at ethnic groups, which are people who share a common cultural background, we see a really big contrast. In countries like Japan, North and South Korea, and Mongolia, there's mainly just one majority ethnic group. They are mostly homogeneous. But China is highly diverse. While the majority of people there are called Han Chinese, the Chinese government officially recognizes 55 different ethnic minority groups. These groups often have their own completely distinctive cultures and even their own unique languages.
Notice the worshippers in this image. This is a picture of a mosque in the north-central Chinese province of Ningxia. These folks are likely members of the Hui people. While they speak Chinese, they practice Islam, which really shows just how incredibly rich and varied the cultural map of East Asia truly is. You have so many different groups living under one single national border.
And speaking of who lives where, we need to learn our last key word: indigenous. This simply means living in a region since ancient times. For instance, most people in Taiwan today are Han Chinese, whose ancestors migrated to the island back in the 1600s. But here's the thing: they weren't the first ones there. Taiwan also has indigenous ethnic groups, people whose ancestors have lived on that island for thousands of years, long before anyone else ever arrived.
Okay, time to wrap things up with our East Asia summary. We've uncovered a ton of clues today, detectives. Let's bring all this evidence together to solve our big mystery. Here are your main takeaways. First, the physical geography, like mountains, deserts, and where that arable grocery store land is, completely dictates where people can live. Second, we learned that harsh weather from climate change and a lack of jobs in rural areas are pushing millions of people right into massive, crowded coastal cities and narrow corridors. And third, despite sharing this region, the people of East Asia are incredibly diverse in their religions, their cultures, and their ethnic backgrounds.
You've done great work today. But, every good detective knows that as soon as one mystery is solved, another one begins. Think about the nomadic herders in Mongolia or those extremely confined spaces in Japan. As climate change continues to alter the land and as populations just keep growing, where do you think the people of East Asia will have to move next? How are they going to adapt? Keep that question in the back of your mind as you continue exploring our amazing world. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this explainer, and I will see you next time.